We can start. Hello and welcome. My name is Anna Higgins, and I'm an assistant of projects and policies in the Internet Society. I'm really happy to be part of this panel of experts today to talk about encryption and
Recording
the
in
LGBTQ
progress.
plus community. Thank you. This event is also very special because it's a bilingual event. We have panelists that will talk in Spanish, English, or both. And I think that that is also very interesting because we can share information. And on your screens, you'll see a button where you can select the interpretation and you can choose which language you want to listen to. I'm also happy to be part of this panel because it's another example of the importance of contribution. In the United States, we've had collaboration with the LGBT tech organization for more than 2 years, and we've built that relationship to work with organizations of LATAM as well. This year, an institute in Brazil was also a participant, helped with the LGBT tech, and that's also an example of how networks of encryption are important everywhere. First, I would like to give a chance to the panelists to introduce themselves and the work that they do. So, Carlos.
No, I can't launch my video.
There are some issues with the communication.
The host has stopped it.
Carlos, puedes probar.
Yeah.
Perfecto.
Hola,
Hello,
Carlos.
everyone. Hola todos. Mucho placer. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you for hosting this forum. My name is Carlos Gutierrez. I am the executive director. I'm the deputy counsel and general counsel of LGBT Technology Partnership. One of the main things that we do is work at the intersection of technology, policy, privacy, and LGBTQ communities. So a lot of our work revolves around making sure that the voices of marginalized communities, like the LGBTQ community, are being considered and heard in policy discussions around technology, privacy, policy, and other types of things. More relevant here, we have done a lot of work around encryption and raising the alarm as to why encryption is not only important, but crucial to LGBTQ plus communities, and the need for strong encryption in order to protect a lot of the rights and a lot of the questions that we have as a community as well. So thank you for allowing us to be here.
Bien, muchas gracias, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Now let's go with Paloma. Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Isaac, for the invitation. I'm really happy to be surrounded by colleagues. Welcome, everyone. My name is Paloma Serman. I'm part of the public policies of WhatsApp for Latin America. I'm Argentinian. I live in Argentina as well, in Buenos Aires, and I work with a group of public policies of WhatsApp on topics related to relationships with the government. And of course, encryption is a core part of WhatsApp, and it's part of its DNA. So it's a very important part of my daily work. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk about something that is so important. Thank you very much, Paloma. Now we have Alinne.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Good to meet you all. I'm a lawyer. I'm from Brazil. I'm also a researcher at the Instituto Liberdade Digital. It's the institute that helped with the translation of the fact sheet. It's been a pleasure to work with this fact sheet that became a really important part of our social media communication. And I've also done an interview with Anna, which was really fun too. I work mainly with research of technology and electoral law, specifically when it comes to democracy and the use for technology for political participation. We are a little new to with the encryption teams, but we are actually conducting a project about encryption with the support of WhatsApp Brazil on the Institute. So it's a pleasure to be here to talk about this a little bit more with you guys.
Bien, muchísimas gracias. Bien, antes de
Thank you very much. Before we begin, there is a button at the bottom of your screens where you can, that says Q&A, where you can put in your any questions. This is a safe space for any questions that you might have. And if you want, you can send me a question on the chat box if you want to do it anonymously. Also, before we begin with the questions, I want to quickly go over what encryption is and why we're talking about encryption. Encryption is a process of codification of data so that it's only read by people who have the keys to return it to its original state. It's a mathematical technique that is generally used to protect data that is stored in technological systems and data that is transmitted, for example, via the internet. When we talk about encryption, about end-to-end encryption, we talk about a specific way of encryption in which only the receiver and the sender can read the message. No one else, no third parties, not even the company that provides the service has access to the necessary keys in order to decrypt the data. And the issue that we have now is that encryption is under threat. Some governments are saying that encryption, mainly end-to-end encryption, doesn't allow public security organisms and national security organisms to do their research work, their investigation work, because also the bad guys, in a way to say, could also use it. So we have different mechanisms that we could have for the government to have access to that digital information. And the problem is that exceptional access is a complicated issue because these things always generate more vulnerability and risks to the systems. So it's very important to fight for a safe encryption because it can protect information and posts and the safety of marginalized communities. So now we have a basic understanding of what encryption is. And I would like to ask my first question to all of you. So why is encryption so important for the LGBTQ+ community and other communities? Can we start with Carlos?
Gracias, Ana. Thank you. Yeah, one of the big surprises that we had when we started doing this research and talking about encryption is just how much and how important it is to our LGBTQ+ community, and in ways that you may not expect. One of the things about the LGBTQ community that's interesting is there's a couple of things. One is that we are one of the few minorities that can be discriminated against at home. So there's a lot of other minorities where you can go home and have a safe space to talk about discrimination and discuss some of the issues you're dealing with. For a lot of LGBTQ youth, home is the place where they're being discriminated against. Home is the place that they have to be careful. So for that reason, LGBTQ youth and individuals turn to online resources and to the internet for community at a much earlier age and in much greater numbers than other communities. So you can imagine that a person who's struggling to figure out their sexuality cannot ask their parents what's going on. So they're going to go online and start talking to friends. Maybe they join a support group. Maybe they reach out to an organization like the Trevor Project here in the US that deals with youth and ask questions about their sexuality. Maybe they're a transgender individual who is really just starting to try to figure out what their gender identity is. All of these communications that they're having could have really catastrophic impact if they get out. So the privacy of the communications between individuals online for LGBT people, having the freedom to be able to communicate with others while they're, maybe still closeted and not out in their communities is really important to them. So there's a community part of this where we're reaching out and making sure that our community is safe, that people who are interacting with our members who are reaching out are not being spied on, their information is not being leaked. So from that perspective, it's really important. I also mentioned transgender individuals, and for us, that's really important because that is a community that has a lot of discrimination against them already, horrific discrimination. So for them to be able to reach out to healthcare professionals that can be, that may know their specific issues, to reach out to communities, even as something as simple as a Facebook chat group that they can join with other individuals. Those communications, again, if that information is not encrypted and if encryption is not part of the communications, it could be the catastrophic. Not only that, it gives them a sense of security when they reach out. They know if they're talking over an encrypted line that whoever they're talking to, that is a private conversation and that their parents aren't going to find out, their priest isn't going to find out, their doctor isn't going to find out. So encryption, knowing that your communication is encrypted, gives our communities a safety and a sense of security when they reach out for these communications. So that's generally, on a big picture.
Thanks so much. And now I'd like to go to Alinne, if you'd like to answer the question as well.
I think the importance of encryption in private communication is definitely important, especially on the establishment of a safe haven, your chosen family. So that's important. Now where teenagers are more and more on the internet and they might not have the understanding that what they're looking could be traced, it's important that they know that this could be traced and how to prevent their parents from knowing what they're looking. I think it's important to explore this a little bit in the school environment too, because the Wi-Fi of the school can also trace back what they're looking for. And schools here in Brazil tend to be a bit homophobic in general. So knowing that while they're logged into the Wi-Fi of the school, they also have a problem with that. And I also wanted to point out the importance of encryption in the environment of activists. I'm sure a lot of us here could be considered activists. So especially in governments where the repression is a little bit more open than Brazil, even though our government is a little bit homophobic too, the persecution is not as great as in other countries. So in those countries where the repression is bigger, it's important to have the encryption to allow activists and groups to strategize and organize and talk about ways to oppose to this oppression.
Thank you so much, Alinne. And now I would like to turn it over to Paloma.
Gracias, Ana. Si a todos les parece bien, voy a
Thank you,
hablar.
Ana. If that's okay with you, I'll speak in Spanish since luckily we have an interpreter. I would like to make my own what the words of Carlos and Alinne. In WhatsApp, we are convinced of the importance of encryption to guarantee rights such as privacy and freedom of expression for users, and especially for a community like the LGBTQ+ community, which may be exposed, unfortunately, to, on the one hand, having fewer channels of freedom of expression and also having situations of harassment, online harassment, unfortunately, in comparison with other groups of users. Considering that my colleagues already talked about that, I would like to say something else, which is the importance of encryption or that we think that it has had for this community, and also for other user groups that are particularly exposed to vulnerability situations during the pandemic, and also to talk about the false tension that there is between safety and security when we talk about encryption. Now, taking your introduction, Anna, about the dangers of encryption right now, of the dangers that it's been threatened by. We are convinced that this dichotomy that there is between privacy and safety is false. We already knew it, but we think that the pandemic has really exposed the importance of internet in our lives. And in these lockdown times and quarantine times, we think that, and we know that the LGBTQ plus community really used end-to-end encryption, such as WhatsApp, to be close to their family, their friends, to have a continuity in their work, in government services, and to be able to maintain those bonds in a safe way and private way, despite the physical distance and the distance that was necessary in this year and a half of the pandemic, but especially last year when the restrictions were especially harsh and it was important to take care of ourselves. So this dichotomy between privacy and safety, we think that is false, because we have the duality. The true duality is trust. We know that without trust, societies cannot work. You can't have freedom of expression, you can't go to the doctor, you can't access relevant information. And so the erosion of trust in digital technologies, especially for communities that are particularly exposed in some aspects, can lead users to not want to use the internet, to abandon services and technologies, to maybe not be able to have a cooling effect in their expression, their freedom of expression. And this, of course, has impact in the culture and in the society. So we think that it's very important to build an ecosystem of safety online and of trust that involves several parties and stakeholders, where we are all responsible of protecting our cybersecurity and to protect encryption and the means of communication, especially nowadays in these delicate times that we're living with the pandemic. And now coming out of it, where we identify lots of habits and methods of communication that have come to stay. For us, from WhatsApp, really protecting the information of our users, their interactions, and privacy of our users and their interactions is a priority. That's why our technological infrastructure that we have deployed worldwide fulfills the highest standards of resilience and security, and we are very proud for our encryption to be able to face threats that we have in the digital environment, and that allows our users and the LGBTQ plus community to connect with their families, their friends, with their colleagues, work colleagues, the possibility of receiving services from companies, the government, and any other important task that we could have in our daily lives. We know that millions of people in this difficult time have interacted with doctors, with health professionals, with people from the government, with small businesses, schools, education institutions, cultural centers. And thanks to that, they have been able to access trustworthy information. So in times that have required us to be kept at a distance, encryption has been and is a tool in WhatsApp that has helped us keep each other close. And that for us is really a reason to be proud of. Thank you very much. Okay, I will switch to English. to ask Carlos something.
All right, great. So Carlos, what I would love to hear from you is if you could talk a little bit more about how encryption can benefit marginalized communities, especially the LGBTQ plus community that you work so much with.
Great, thank you. And I'm listening to the original audio, so you can ask me in Spanish. Yeah, I think one of the things that that is really important about this conversation is that this isn't just about LGBTQ rights, it's about human rights in general. And a lot of the conversation that we're having and a lot of the issues that we're discussing for the LGBTQ plus community apply to a lot of the communities. We often work, like Paloma knows, we work with domestic violence survivors and the use of encryption for domestic violence survivors. A lot of conversations that we've had and a lot of the people that we work with are in the journalism area. And it is very clear that encryption, it is a vital tool for an honest and open journalistic exchange. Without apps like WhatsApp and other encrypted apps like Signal, a lot of these groups cannot communicate openly. So one of the misconceptions, I think, and one of the myths that we have to break when we talk about encryption is that this whole concept of lawful actions, that if you are being lawful, then you don't have anything to worry about because this is only about catching criminals. And that is really, really dangerous for LGBTQ plus communities. There are more than 70 countries around the world where LGBTQ activities and identity are illegal or are criminalized. People can go to jail for being LGBTQ plus. People can be put to death in countries like Iran or Uganda. Well, Uganda is still talking about passing a bill, but in Uganda right now, you can go to jail for 10 years for being LGBTQ plus. So when you talk about government action or allowing government actors to access encryption and just the good guys getting into it, you have a whole issue about who is making those decisions and what is being considered criminal behavior. And we know very well with what's going on in Brazil right now, what's going on in Russia, with Russia turning off the apps for the opposition by literally walking into the Google and Apple offices and threatening arrest. We know that in Brazil, the president has now said that there's certain speech that cannot be taken off social media. And these are the kind of conversations and the kind of issues that if you break encryption, and you kind of make this argument that encryption is only to be used by the government for lawful purposes, you raise a whole host of questions of who's making that decision and how is that decision impacting communities that may not be well thought of by that government. So for LGBTQ people, it is a very dangerous assumption that it's only going to be used for governments. This is also a global issue because if we break encryption, for a government agency or for lawful purposes, anyone traveling to one of these countries is now vulnerable. And we may not be aware of the rules as an LGBTQ traveler going to Russia for a conference or going to another country that criminalizes LGBTQ behavior. I may all of a sudden be faced with a penalty or with being a criminal in a country that I'm not even a citizen of. So this is a global issue. And breaking encryption in one country affects everyone else. And having a conversation about this is only for lawful purposes begs the question. And not only for LGBTQ communities, but for other marginalized communities or other protest movements in countries that may have a more authoritarian bent. We know that those kind of individuals will also be targeted by backdoors like this. So for marginalized communities, encryption is one of the few ways that you can kind of at least guarantee a semblance of security and safety in your communications. And if we break that, it's going to be very hard for marginalized communities to organize and affect any change.
Thanks so much, Carlos. Those are a lot of really good points to keep in mind. My next question is for Alinne. I want to ask you if you can talk a little bit more about what encryption means for marginalized communities in Brazil specifically, and especially when it comes to LGBTQ plus communities. If you can talk a little bit more about what it's like there and what encryption means to the communities there. And I don't know if you can speak to the Latin America region more broadly, but if you could, that would also be great to hear.
Of course. I want to start by saying that Brazil is not a welcoming country to LGBTQ plus communities. We have a very strong history of repression and authoritative governments. And I think we all know here that the rights of marginalized groups are very temporary and fragile. So we have to keep fighting for them all the time. And we don't know what a change of government will mean for them. So that's the reality we live here. Brazil is a homophobic country in general. We are the country that kills the most transgender people in the world for the 12th consecutive year, which is a lot of years and a lot of people dead. And this is the reality of the country we live in. And I think we are constantly worrying about when will the next rights fall. And I think having a safe environment where we can talk about these concerns and talk about the new bill that is outrageous and homophobic, transphobic, and it could mean the falling of very well-fought rights is important and essential, especially for kids. I talked a little bit about chosen family, and I think besides the world-ending aspect of dictatorship coming back, I think in the smallest circle, having people to talk to, especially when you're young and you don't know what's happening, it doesn't have to be disruptive and it doesn't have to be world changing. For one person, having that circle can mean everything. So I think we can talk about the encryption in Brazil from two separate perspectives. The larger perspective of talking about and strategizing and trying to oppose to bills and rules in a government that is provenly and openly homophobic, and also in a smaller scale where you're talking to your friends and trying to figure out where you belong in the world. I don't know if I'm capable of speaking to the Latin America as a broader, but I think in Brazil, those are the main cores that when I think about encryption, I think about.
Thank you so much. And I have one follow-up question. You mentioned a bill that was going on. Could you explain what that is really quickly?
Oh, yeah. It's a bill here in São Paulo. It's the state I'm from. And it basically forbidden LGBTQ people from being in publicity, basically associating LGBTQ people with sex and drugs and prostitution. It didn't pass, gratefully, but it is an example of the kind of state of mind that we have in the legislators here in Brazil right now in 2021.
That is horrifying to hear that that was proposed, but thank you for explaining that. Okay, I'm going to switch to Spanish really quickly for a question for Paloma. Bien, gracias. Entonces, Paloma, quiero saber.
Paloma, I want to know if you could give us some examples of how encryption could benefit the region, because I understand that your work with WhatsApp has implemented some hotlines, and could you talk about that topic? Yes, of course, gladly. Thank you. First, I don't want to repeat myself, but I would like to show the situation of the beginning of the pandemic, to talk about that situation to everyone. The measures of lockdown and quarantine and social distancing that were implemented due to the pandemic really placed women, people from the LGBTQ plus community in a situation of being locked in and living with their aggressors. And a lot of reports and figures show that violence, gender violence, for example, really escalated worldwide and in Latin America. As I said, many times these people were in small spaces confined with their aggressors for a longer time than what they would usually be. And so this really worsened the risk situations. And in parallel, the pandemic put the government, the local governments, in a situation of having less possibility of responding. The ability to respond to these situations was more difficult. The people that were living these situations where it was really harder for them to try to seek for help. And it was difficult for these people to have safe spaces. And they also had a lot of economic difficulties as well due to the context. So we're slowly coming out of that, but after 18 months of a pandemic that has continued, this, of course, has a very big cost for our communities, unfortunately. And so the need to develop new channels that adapt to this reality where it was evident. And that's where the API of WhatsApp Business comes in, which is a tool that uses encryption, that uses signal encryption protocol. And that's where we started to work with the Women Ministry and of Gender Equality of Chile and the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality of Argentina to try to see how to approach this issue through technological development that really was the first in the world with these characteristics, launched simultaneously in Argentina and in Chile, that allows the use of this channel for a person who is exposed to this risk situation to receive information on how to seek for help in a risk situation. Some of the main characteristics of this channel is that it uses signal encryption, as I just said. It is an effective tool that is safe to respond to these situations because it's silent. People who have to look for this information or look for help can just write. They don't need to call. So this allows for more flexibility and agility. It's also more intuitive and inclusive because since it's written, people with difficulties to speak can also use it, while maybe a phone call can be more difficult for them. And of course, a very important point is that since it's written, something that we noticed, that the ministries that manage this noticed, is that interactions were more on and off. They started and ended, and then they began again. So the interaction was longer. It was extended in time, probably thinking about these confinement situation with the aggressors that I mentioned a moment ago. And the reality is that the results in this sense, we're really proud of them. As I said, being a silent tool, it allowed for on and off communication, and the length of the communication is being longer. So that allows people who are looking for help to be able to take more time to really ask for what they need. And so also the time for supporting from the operators was multiplied fourfold. And another thing is that the operators that respond to these information requests notice that the information that they receive is sometimes more graphic because the person who is at risk has the chance to really talk more about their situation. For the ministries of Argentina and Chile, both of them, since the beginning of last year, they have this channel and this service that is new and flexible for people who are exposed to this situation, which of course complements the already existing hotline, the classic one, on the phone. Here in Argentina, it's 144. They work simultaneously. The Ministry of Chile told us that around 30% of the questions that I receive now are on the WhatsApp channel. And what, at least for me, is a big highlight is that this is a safe tool that is silent and trustworthy. So it really adds value to a person who is at risk to ask for help and to be able to find the help that they need. And it also combines the advantages of artificial intelligence, like a chatbot, because when you first write to these accounts, you receive a menu where you can find some initial information with human support, because there is an operator on the other side that can answer the request. And of course, WhatsApp is a tool that has very big penetration in Argentina and Chile, where we have these tools. And it's a tool that is 100% intuitive, easy to use, trustworthy. And so in this sense, the ministry can really make use of the how widespread WhatsApp is for these types of users on smartphones, for example. And we think that that is very positive. Thank you very much for all of that information. We already have a question in the Q&A section. I'm going to read it for everyone. Oscar asks, when a member of the LGBTQ plus community is a victim of doxing, so being exposed online, what measures can be taken by the technological platforms to protect that person? Remembering that internet doesn't forget. So anyone can answer that if you want.
I can talk a little bit and then throw it over to Paloma Alinne. Yeah, I think doxing is an issue, and obviously not only for the LGBTQ community, but for everyone. And I think that when we talk about doxing, one of the main things you can do to protect yourself is obviously to lock down your accounts and share as little public social media information as you can, so that you do not become a victim. Short of that, I'm pretty sure doxing is against the terms of service for pretty much every major social media company and website. So reporting it to the companies and trying to get that scrubbed off the internet is an option, but you really have to kind of pay attention and figure out how much you're willing to put into this. It is a long process. Like the question said, the internet does not forget. So going down here, these tools it's a long process, but I think the best thing that people can do is making sure that they are protecting their accounts, locking down the information so it's not publicly available. And then if they are being doxxed, that they have to check the terms of services for the services where this is being posted and report the information to those companies directly.
Yo sí puedo agregar, como todos saben,
if I could add something, as you know, WhatsApp has end-to-end encryption. And therefore, doxing is not an issue per se that could happen on WhatsApp, since communications are private. And our statistics, what they show us is that 90% on the global level of the conversations that our users have are between two people, and that groups have around 10 members or fewer. But having said this, we do think that there's a series of settings and safety settings that we recommend for all our users, but especially for those who are particularly exposed to digital violence, harassment, threats, and etc. that we think are of use, for example, for the LGBTQ plus community. So there are settings that you can use in your WhatsApp account. The first would be that in the group configurations, you can choose who can add you automatically to a group. So that allows for you to be less exposed to the situation of being added to a group and be subject of threats, bullying, insults, the type of situation of that kind. So in your settings and configuration, you can choose if you want any WhatsApp user to be able to add you to a group, whether they have you in their contacts or not. Only people who are in your contacts, only some people who you have in your contacts, or nobody being able to add you automatically to a group. And in that case, let's suppose that I want to invite Anna to a WhatsApp group. and I can't add her automatically. What I can do is send her an invite via individual chat, and she will be able to accept it or not before it expires. So that is a first safety setting that we recommend, so that for you to take into account when you use our platform. Another configuration is the possibility of our profile picture not being available for any user by default. You can choose who sees your profile picture, if only your contacts or any user on WhatsApp. So that also allows us to set our privacy and have more control on the configurations, the privacy configurations. And the last two that I would like to highlight are the possibility to identify resent messages. Messages that are resent have an arrow in the message on the upper left corner, and there's a sign that says that it has been resent. And when it has been resent 5 or more times, it will have a double arrow and it will say that it has been resent many times. That means that that's viral content. And you should therefore, that should therefore at least help you think with a critical mind if that's the message that we want to resend or not. And of course, about messages that were resent, there are restrictions on them being resent. The more a message is resent, the more restrictions there are for it to be resent. And numbers show us that these configurations have a result because they work, because recent messages worldwide have diminished. And also, I would like to invite everyone who uses WhatsApp and are subject to a harassment situation or bullying situation to report, whether it's an individual chat or a group chat. It's important to report those accounts. And if you have unsolicited contacts, please block that account, abandon the groups. And also the possibility of muting a conversation or storing it forever. So those are all tools that we have to report situations that we shouldn't be going through. And on the other hand, diminishing interactions that are not wanted and people who are not wanted.
Thank you so much. You named a lot of really good ways that WhatsApp has features that users can use to prevent doxing. But I also want to ask Carlos and Alinne, in your personal experiences, are there any other tools that you find useful when it comes to protecting online security, especially for LGBTQ+ communities? And Alinne, would you like to go first?
I think one of the most important things that I personally use is a VPN. I think it's a really good way to stop the tracing of your traffic. I think actually this was a tip from you, Anna, the password organizer. I use that now too. And the confirmation of 2 steps. I think mostly all the common social media and private communication apps have that now. So I think that's really important. And just general good sense when you're using internet to distrust everything you receive until proven right. I think that's pretty much it.
I agree. I think the locking down of your information before it gets out is important. I think one of the other things that I think a lot of people need to do if you've been doxxed is find someone that you trust to turn over this kind of process to. It can be very scary and it can be very overwhelming if you've been doxxed to feel these attacks and have this stream of hate or harassment coming in. So one of the things that you can do is find a trusted person that can be your kind of stand-in and your advocate and deal with filtering the information that you actually receive. Somebody that can delete comments, somebody that can contact companies and provide them with the information so that they can make these changes. A lot of the things that you can do is just taking care of yourself, making sure that you're not exposing yourself to harassment unnecessarily and taking advantage of the tools and the support system around you to help you make sure that your mental health is a paramount thing that is being protected here. So again, reporting the terms of service, locking down your accounts, but having somebody that you trust help you work through the process if you've been doxxed, and letting them kind of take the brunt of the harassment and hate will help a lot with you kind of maintaining a balance and making sure that it doesn't become too overwhelming.
Lo siento. Bien, muchísimas gracias. Y también,
Okay, thank you very much. And also, I would like to say that in our Q&A, there's a resource of a platform in Guatemala for reports to support the community. So I'll put it in the chat. I'll put the website on the chat. Okay. So you can keep on asking questions if you have them. And also, I would like to ask something to Alinne about schools. You talked about young people in Brazil and the threats that there are against young people in the LGBTQ plus community. Could you talk a bit more about if there is a lot of knowledge about digital threats among young people? Do they know that there are a lot of digital threats that could create problems for them?
Of course. I think young people right now are a lot more informed than they've ever been about these things. When I was young, the internet was present, but it wasn't a huge deal that is now. And I certainly didn't know anything. I've gotten so many viruses when I was a kid, I cannot even begin to count them. But I do think the young people are more interested and more preoccupied about data protection and privacy online and what's happening to their data, who is having access to what they're seeing. I don't think it's ideal yet, the amount of knowledge. I think there's always space, especially in poor communities and people that are more distant from the capitals. I still think there's space to bring this subject and discuss it in schools and teach them about how to protect themselves, because theoretically kids are going to do stupid things on the internet. So we want to make sure that they do stupid things, but in a controlled and safe way. So I tend to think that they are interested, they are knowledgeable, but we still have a long way to teach them. And I think that's our role as people who understand the matter and people that are a bit older than them. Try to make the information available in a palatable way and not so academic in nature.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch to Spanish for my last question. Bien, pues mi última pregunta.
My last question for you is about the importance of a collaboration and having organizations like colleagues and other people in this fight for encryption. I wanted to know if you could talk a bit about the importance of collaboration in your organizations. Paloma, could we start with you? Of course. Well, a bit of what I said at the beginning, in WhatsApp, we are convinced that protecting encryption and that the experience that we have online in general should be a safe one and that is trustworthy for everyone. And that's a responsibility of the whole internet ecosystem. So that's why we say that we're all co-responsible of protecting our safety and encryption. And in that sense, We work with governments and public safety institutions, but especially with civil organizations and academics and other experts in the area. Nowadays, in Latin America, we see what was happening in Brazil in particular, but as you said at the beginning, in the world, in the whole world, the objective of going forward on the encryption topic and protecting encryption is a thing. And it's very important for all of us to be stakeholders and actors of the internet ecosystem and to be able to defend it. And that's why on WhatsApp, it's a pleasure to be able to work together with allies in this direction. We hope that this only continues to grow. Thank you. So Alinne?
I definitely agree. I think we are stronger together. Any effort that we have of bringing knowledge or opposing things that we don't find right, we are stronger with numbers. And I think it's interesting to exchange experiences from other countries so we can understand a bit more globally where we stand and take the experiences from other people, from other countries, from other groups that are having similar fights than we are, and see what we can take from them and what we can do different, suggest things to each other, and just generally exchange knowledge. The production of academic research, it's a gift that we have, and it's important that we just bring it to as many people as possible, and just create more all the time.
Muchas gracias. Y entonces, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Carlos.
I don't think it's overstating it to say that partnerships for us are crucial for the work that we do. We're a very small organization. We have 3 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. I do a bulk of the policy work, and without partnerships like partnerships with ISOC or with other organizations, we wouldn't be able to have the voice in this conversation that we had. The encryption one sheet and the encryption infographic that we created was based on a conversation and a cooperation with ISOC. Without ISOC's involvement in this one sheet, it wouldn't have happened. So for a lot of groups like ours, these collaborations are basically, it's a lifeblood for getting our word out. Without being able to work with other groups that do this work and being able to collaborate and take advantage of their resources and their knowledge, we wouldn't be able to do the work we do. So for us, it is crucial. And I think for a lot of small organizations in this space, you cannot underestimate the value of having somebody else come in and say, hey, we have these resources, we have this background, we have this expert voice. And those voices are the ones that allow me to be like, okay, you know what? I don't have to do all this research, and I don't have to make sure that I get everything done 100% right. There's somebody backing me up on this. I can take on this work. So partnerships are a lifeblood for us, and our organization wouldn't be able to do what we do without really successful partnerships and really kind of input from a lot of organizations who are, I will have a lot more resources in this area than we do. So yeah, we are very happy with the partnerships that we have.
Bien, muchísimas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think that we are on time. So I just want to thank all of our panelists and my colleagues from the Internet Society and our interpreter and Charlie for being able to connect with this panel. Thank you very much, everyone who has been a part of the session. Thank you very much. And just thank you.